And we are live. Welcome to the first row. What's going on? It's your boy Billy Rowe. Today is Wednesday. So you know what that means. It's time for your Wednesday word. That's Wednesday word. Jumping straight into it. So tonight's topic is, what are we worried about? I always like to start off with what I mean by my topic. So when I started thinking about this topic, what are we worried about? What I was really thinking about was the peaks and the valleys that we experience in life in different areas in life, whether it's professionally, romantically, independently. We have these peaks and these valleys that we experience. And there's two times when we worry. When we're at the pinnacle of our success or the peak, we typically worry about the fall that is to come. When we are in the valleys, we are worried how we might be stuck in this valley for a long time. So what are we worried about is, if we understand that peaks and valleys are going to take place, why are we worried about them? And what does that worry typically do to us? So I have about 4 or 5 points that I want to share with you tonight on things that I feel like will help you in being less worried about the peaks and valleys that life has to offer. So the first tool that I came up with when I was thinking about this topic was the importance of keeping your head up. So when we typically fall into these valleys, you can see kind of in people's postures when they feel defeated, they kind of slump over and they put their head down and they're less engaging, and they're actually in a position where their head is down, and because their heads are down, they can't see really far, like into the future. They can't see really far into the distance. And so when I relate to distance, I'm referring to the future. So the first thing when it comes to being, what are we worried about or not being worried about things, is you've got to be able to keep your head up. You'll see in football when a running back has, the ball and he's going to go for a dive through the middle of the offensive and defensive lines to try to gain yards, he has his head up. He's not running down, looking down. He's actually tucking his chin, but his eyes are still following what's going on in front of him so that he can identify holes, he can identify blocks, he can identify opportunities to progress the ball. And a lot of the experience that we have in valleys, when we put our head down and our eyes actually go down with it, we're not able to identify the opportunities to get out of the valleys or out of the lower areas of life to even return to a peak. Sometimes when your head's down and you're at the top of the peak, that's when you actually fall off the peak. We've seen this happen with a ton of companies. I have a personal acquaintance of mine who has a PowerPoint slide, and he talks about the different companies that were once great in their era, but they failed to evolve and they failed to change because their head was down. They were like, we got it, we're the best, we're the standard setter. And so then they stuck with that standard but never grew. And because they never grew, now that some of those companies are bankrupt and no longer existing, are in existence. So the first tool that's very critical is keeping your head up in order to see how you're going to get out of a situation or see how the light at the end of the tunnel may appear. You're going to have your head up to see that. Other than that, you might be veering off and get ready to run into a wall that's going to knock you back down into the valley or knock you off top of the peak. So that's the first tool. The second tool that I came up with while I was thinking about this topic was, and it's something that I struggle with myself, is you have to learn how to reject the negative story. And I say that from a standpoint of the negative story that is within and the negative story that is without, or on the outside. So the negative story that's within is, if you fall down and you're in the valley, like let's say you lose your job, you get fired, and you're kind of just in this rhythm of beating yourself up and, how could I be so stupid? Or you transition from how could I be so stupid to a victim mentality. Well, they were just picking on me and everybody's always picking on me. Then what you do is you're immobilizing yourself internally. Or if you accept the negative story from somebody else, there's been plenty of times I do inspirational content online. So there's been plenty of times that people have tried to use that against me. Well, you do videos online, so you should know better. Well, just because I do videos online and I seek to inspire people doesn't mean that I have my entire life all together. I was having a conversation earlier this week, or maybe at the end of last week, where I told this person that I was speaking to, I said, look, regardless of what I say to you, if I could say, you're the best person on planet Earth. If the internal story is I don't have worth, I'm worthless, nobody loves me, and I'm all these negative things, then it doesn't matter how much love I attempt to pour into you from the outside. It has to go through the filter of the negativity on the inside. So the importance of rejecting that negative story is critical. And the reason it's critical is because that negative story kind of dictates your emotions. And we, as I believe, as humans, use our emotions very strongly as a compass for which direction we're going to go in. It's almost like the compass that says, yes, I deserve it, so I should seek to get it and work to get it, or no, I don't deserve it, or no, it's not worth it, and I don't need to put the effort in to try to get out of it. So sometimes we fall into these valleys and we get stuck in these routines or these stories that are almost like the Twilight Zone that we can't escape from. And so because we can't escape from them, we don't put the effort in. Oh, I'm never going to get out of this valley anyway, so I might as well just stay where I'm at. And we never seek to climb back up to the peak. So that was the second tool, is rejecting the negative story on the inside. Hey, what's going on, brother Bruce? Your compass be bugging. Yeah, mine too, brother. I feel it. The third tool that I came up with on this particular topic was to seek to understand patterns. So I'm a very analytical person. Actually, my job, I am an analyst. But I'm a very analytical person outside of my job as well. And what you do when you are an analyst is you look at data, tons of data. It can be numerics, it can be charts, it can be graphs, and you try to identify what they call the trend. You try to see if it's a positive trend, if it's a negative trend. You try to figure all these things these different trends out, so that you can identify the pattern and attempt to predict where the trend is going next. So the reason this is important when you're dealing with the situation of what you're worrying about and how it may distract you from moving forward, or how it may distract you from seeking to climb back up the mountain, is if we look at our lives, or the timeline of our lives in its entirety, we start finding that there are these dips that take place. You know, there's you're broke and you don't have any money because you live with your parents as a young child, and then you get a little bit of money, and then maybe you lose that job or you quit that job and your income dips. And then you get another job and your income goes back up, either to the same. It typically doesn't go very much lower if it does go lower, but it goes back up. So you'll see these blips and these dips where you might spike. There's a moment where you might be balling. There's a moment where you might be broke, but you're able to see that it's a trend. It's a pattern. And if you're able to understand and you seek to understand patterns, you will understand that even at your lowest point in life, if the clock is still ticking and you're still drawing breath, you have the ability to turn it around and get back up to the peak. So that is why it's important to understand patterns and seek to understand patterns, is because once you know that, hey, this is temporal. Our life is very temporal as far as we move through it. It's not there's certain constants, but everything else is like, I could lose the job that I have tomorrow, and it would be up to me to find my next job. As a matter of fact, I actually quit a job, didn't have a job. And because I didn't have a job, I knew I wasn't old enough to retire, nor did I have enough money saved to retire. So I knew that I was going to eventually have another job. So I didn't really worry about the fact that I didn't have a job at that time. So that's I think we're on number 3, the third tool. True story, Bruce. This too shall pass. Don't take him to church. It's Wednesday. This is the word, but don't take him to church. So that's the other thing. And then also, I'm sorry, one of the things I want to go back to, because I have a note here, is some cycles can be broken. So you might see that instead of a trend line going in one direction in life, you'll realize the pattern is, I think it's cynical. I forget what it's called, but it's a circle. You'll find that, oh, I start here, I go around, I feel better, I get worse. I start here, I go around, I feel better, I get worse. You'll see a cycle. And so it's about identifying what's bringing your cycle around so that you can break the pattern and not continue to experience the same thing. When I was younger, and sometimes as an adult, I deal with depression. And so when I'm dealing with depression, I go into myself, but not in the way that I used to when I was younger. I used to go into myself and I'm like, I ain't coming back out. This is not the day. Okay, extreme picks. I don't know what that is, but we'll see. Thank you. Cyclical. Thank you, brother Antoine. But as far as for myself, when I would go into myself for depression, then I'd come out, but I'd never really resolve anything. It was until I stopped going inside myself during depression that I realized, oh, this is what's causing this depression. And I was able to interrupt that cycle so that it wouldn't come back around and say, oh, depression. Now, does that mean that I'll never be depressed again based on trends? Probably not. But as far as the circular cycle, or oh my gosh, I got to read that word, cyclical cycle of falling into depression, I was able to break that. So the next tool that I have is that you got to own the recovery process. So if you're in the valley, you can't expect that somebody's sending a life flight helicopter for you to be rescued. You have to own the recovery process. And the story that stands out to me most, I don't even know like all the details, I just remember the story when I seen it in the news, was the young man it was a young man, I believe, who was trapped in a canyon or something under a boulder. And he had to basically cut off one of his limbs with a pocket knife in order to get himself to safety. Now, could somebody have possibly found him and rescued him before he cut his leg off? Sure, that could have happened. But that's what I'm talking about owning that recovery process. Do you want to sit at the boulder and wait and hope that a mountain lion or bobcat or a wolf or a coyote doesn't come to gnaw on you? Or do you want to be actively engaged in your recovery process? You see this with people who are alcoholics, who they are actively engaged in their recovery process when they keep themselves out of environments that don't have alcohol. You can't say that you're actively engaged in your recovery process if you're putting yourself as an alcoholic in situations where you can consume alcohol. So again, it's about owning or really being extremely accountable to your recovery process. The next tool that I have, and it's the last tool that I have when I was thinking about this topic, was acceptance. Sometimes life is not fair. Sometimes you make a mistake and it sets you back. And so you have to be able to, you don't have to be able to. I recommend you choose to accept your situation. And accepting your situation, what it does is it empowers you to really own the recovery process. So if I accept that my decisions got me from A to Z, and this is where I'm at Z, and I don't like it, then I can accept that these decisions got me here. So that way I can then change the decisions that I'm making from A to Z in the next trend or in the next stanza or in the next section of the timeline. So acceptance of your decisions, acceptance of your role, acceptance of the part that you played, it really empowers you as the individual who is in the valley or the individual who is at the peak to either stay there or start doing the work to climb back out. Because now it may take more time. If I get myself into debt, or if I'm extremely obese, it may take some time for me to get myself back to a weight that is healthier for me. It may take some time to climb out of the debt that I got myself into, but that is a matter of accepting the decisions that I made to get there, and then accepting new decisions to make to get out of that predicament that it may be. So those are the bullets that I came up with, or the tools that I came up with. It's keep your head up, reject the negative story inside and that's coming from outside if there is one, seek to understand patterns, own the recovery process, and then accept that your decisions are yours to make, and then go ahead and make better decisions so that you can have a better result. So as always with the Wednesday Word, I like to share a personal story with myself, or about myself, sometimes about other people's, but this one's about myself, that really resonates with me on this particular topic about what are we worried about. And so it was a little difficult to select a story on this one because I've kind of gotten to a place now where I try to keep worry out of my life just because it creates stress. Stress creates, I think it's cortisol or something like that. And then you lose your higher functioning abilities to think. So I try to stay away from that. Yes, you got to keep your head up, squad. So as far as the story that I decided to share for this particular Wednesday Word, it's a combination of stories, and it's about my last year when I started making some extreme changes in my own life. So last year, I really was reflecting internally and found that I wasn't happy in a couple of areas. I found that my relationship that I was in I wasn't happy in, and so I chose to bring that relationship to an end. So I went through a separation last year. Then I realized that my job also wasn't fulfilling my monetary needs or my intellectual needs, and I didn't feel appreciated. So I went in and I actually decided to resign that job. And then after all those decisions were made, I took another step and then left the state and the city that I've lived in my entire life and moved to Utah. So I made some pretty big jumps that beforehand I more than likely wouldn't have made, because I would have just been worried, well, if I leave this relationship, then what does that say about all the time that I've invested in it? If I quit this job, then how am I going to provide for myself? If I move from California, the only place that I ever known, to a place that I've never been before, what does that mean for me socially? What does that mean for me economically? And so instead of all those worries, really what I put at the priority was, what do I think is going to help me be happier about who I am? What do I think is going to be helpful in moving me towards the person that I want to become? And so I started making decisions based off of that, instead of being worried about the unknown fears that were lingering in the dark, the quote unquote boogeyman of life. And when I did that, all of a sudden things started taking place. I mean, like I said, I resigned from my job. I didn't get fired. It wasn't forced to quit. I resigned from my job. And when I resigned from my job, I didn't take into account that, oh, wow, you just quit, so you can't get unemployment. Oh, wow, your income is going to stop coming in because you only got 2 weeks of vacation before you don't have any more money come in. And because you quit, there won't be any additional money coming in. So when I did that, it was just like, I didn't worry about those things. Now, can that be considered reckless? I do think you need to take some things into account. But what I did take into account was, you're valuable. You're a great employee. You have a strong work ethic. Wherever you go, you present yourself well. You do well in interviews. You'll figure this out. So for me, it was about making decisions based on the known values, instead of focusing and worrying about the things that I didn't know, or the unknowns that I have no way of knowing until I get there. So yes, is it scary leaving a relationship that you've been in for over a decade and not knowing what the dating pool looks like? Yes, that's kind of scary. But do you have standards, and do you stick to those standards? And do you hold people accountable to the standards that you set when it comes to dating? Yes. So then what's so scary? Did you feel valued at the job that you were at? No. Do you want to be valued at the job that you're at? Yes. Do you move to a job and does it possibly value you or not value you? Yes, but you find out when you get there. Do you move to a new state where you know nobody? Do you think you'll find friends? Do you think you'll figure out the lay of the land? Yes. And when you start believing in those things in yourself, that is when you start asking yourself, what am I worried about? See, what am I worried about is not about just the peaks and the valley. It's really a question that you're asking yourself, almost like sarcastically, like, you've been here before. You started off with 0 friends. You have tons of friends now. So what is it going to do when you move to a different state and you start off with 0 people that you know? You'll figure it out. And that's what that "what are you worried about" is about. So I hope you guys have enjoyed today's Wednesday word. As always, I'm happy that you guys have engaged. I'm not sure who Extreme Picks is, but I'm not sure what that YouTube link is. So don't click that, because I don't know who that is. But I'm happy you guys engaged in the comments. I'm happy you guys were with me to rock with this particular Wednesday word. As always, if you like this video, share it. If you share it, please like it. I'm happy to engage with you in the comments below, in the live chat, or in the comments for those watching the replay. If you haven't done so already, please click the subscribe button to the First Row YouTube channel, and make sure you click the bell so that you're notified when I come on live or I have a live show that's coming on. Speaking of the live shows, the next live show that will be on the First Row will be next week on Tuesday. What is that? November 27th. And that will be at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That will be a First Row Intersation with the topic of never give up. And that's with my boy Key Bryant. I think you'll love it. Hopefully you can tune in live. But other than that, I'm glad you guys rock with me today. As always, happy to engage with you at any time. Till the next show that we got, thank you for sitting on the first row. One love, peace, and God bless.